Welcome to LSAT Express. If you're watching this video, you're probably either studying for the LSAT right now or at least thinking about studying for the LSAT, and you've probably heard of the infamous logic games section of the test. The logic games section, I can tell you after tutoring folks for more than 20 years, is by far the most confusing part of the test. The good news is that it's also the most teachable. And so what I'm going to do today, I'd like to be your go-to guy for stress-free LSAT prep. I'm going to go over how to set up two different types of logic games. One is called a sequencing game. The other is called a grouping game. You see the sequencing game over here. So, are you ready for the time of your life? Let's write out the rules here. Rule 1, T is placed after N. So here's N. T is somewhere to its right. Somewhere to its right. It might be right next to N. It might be a few slots after N. But T is somewhere to the right of N. Okay, simple enough. Let's see. Rule 2. This is interesting. V and W are basically next to each other. So it could be VW, but then again, it could be that as well. You see these rules, you could call them block rules. They appear as a block. So we're literally going to write a block around those letters just to kind of really indicate they have to be right next to each other. Let's see. Rule 3, K is placed fifth. You would want to write K equals 5. I mean, you do want to do that. You want to list all your rules on the left-hand side as you're writing out during the test, but we're going to put this in the diagram as well. That makes it a lot easier, not surprisingly. How about rule 4? Rule 4, S. I could write equals 2 or 6, and we'll do that, and you would do that on the test, but you also, of course, want to write it in the diagram. So now what do we do? Step 1 is always to write out the rules. Step 2 is to ask, well, can I combine the rules? Do any rules talk about the same letter, for example? Well, let's see. NTVWKS. Nobody talks about the same letter, so we can't combine them in that way. How about anybody not talked about? Yeah, P. Let's circle P. P is your floater. P is your Katy Perry, your Lady Gaga, the wild child. P doesn't want to be tied down. P wants to be able to float around anywhere. You really want to note if there's a floater and who the floater is. So we've done that. Step 3. Build out your diagram and make deductions, draw conclusions, things that must be true, cannot be true, could be true. So, building out the diagram, what do I want to do? Well, I'm looking at rule 4 here. S could be 2 or 6. Makes a lot of sense to create two diagrams, to create sort of two states of the world, two scenarios, I like to call them, two broad scenarios. So let's do that. Magic, how about that? So if you do this, you're not going to be pulling your hair out. It's going to make it a lot easier. Now, let's look at the rules, see how we can blend them into the diagram, how we can build them in, see if there are any deductions we can make. So, of course, rule 2, this WV block, this VW block, I mean, we'll write it here. Write it in scenario 1, write it in scenario 2. How about N before T? And then let's see, K and S we talked about. How about our floater, our wild child P? You want to put that, you want to write that down, circle it. Now let's see, what do we know? Great questions to ask yourself are what could be true, what must be true, what cannot be true. First of all, what could be true? And it's always a great idea to ask who could be first, who could be last. That's a really good question to ask yourself. So scenario 1, well, V and W could not be first, right? Because they're a block. N could be first. P could be first. T cannot be first, right? Because T, if T were first, N would be in a slot 0, and there is no slot 0. So N or P, those are the only two items could be first. If there are only two items, it's a good idea, I think, to note them that way. If it were more than 2, you're not going to write down a bunch of items. But if it's only 2, that's a good thing to note. How about who could be last? Well, let's see. This VW block could be at the end. It could be in the 6, 7 slot. So W could be last, V could be last, P, of course, could be last, our floater, and T could be last. We're not going to write down 4 items, but you always want to ask yourself, who could be first, who could be last? How about scenario 2? Who could be first? Well, here, W and V, either one of them could be first. Of course, N could be first, P could be first, so we're not going to write all that down, but we do want to be aware of it. Who could be last, however? Oh, it's either P or it's T. So 2 items, we're going to put that in there. So that's your setup. That's your setup. Now people ask me, how long should I take to do this? I mean, it's a limited amount of time on the test. It's 35 minutes, 4 logic games. You know, how much time? I can't spend 10 minutes doing this. The short answer is 2 to 3 minutes. The longer answer is if it's the first game on the test, 2 minutes. If it's games 3 or 4 or 5, no, game 2 or 3 or 4, 2 to 3 minutes. If you spend less than 2 minutes, you're not making the deductions that can make the game a lot easier to deal with. Now, if you spend more than 3 minutes, you're sucking away time that you could otherwise spend on questions. So 2 to 3 minutes is the sweet spot. All right, and so that's game 1. That's your setup. I think it makes a lot of sense to master logic games early on in your studies. It just relieves a lot of stress. And what I recommend you do, if you go to the website, you'll see there's a recommended study schedule in the community page. You just click on the button community, a recommended study schedule, the first 3 weeks, logic games. And they're all drawn from this book, 36 logic games from, this is a group of real past LSATs. Of course, you see it over here, and there's a link below in the description box. Listed in order of difficulty, ordered by type and by difficulty. You just want to get that done. Then you can focus your time on the logical reasoning and the reading comp sections. So that's that. The second game we're going to do is called a grouping game. You see it over here. Before we jump into it, just a few quick points. The first is if you follow us on social media, you'll see regular posts on law school admissions, law school applications, the LSAT, of course, little mini lessons on logical reasoning, logic games. Second point, if you have any questions about the test, about law school admissions, law school applications, by all means, post them in the comment section. I will respond. This is supposed to be interactive, right? YouTube videos are supposed to be interactive. I will respond. And if you have anything you'd like me to post on social media, just let me know in the comment section as well. Third point, I'm curious to know who watches the video. I'm curious to know who the audience is. That will make it easier to post better videos in the future. So just let me know whether you're a junior, a senior, or a college graduate, and 2 or 3 law schools you're thinking of applying to. That really helps. So, more magic. So let's dive into this game. And by the way, I'm giving you as many virtual high fives as I possibly can. If you find the video helpful, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends. You'll see a share button below. Let's jump into this. So we have 5 items, 3 groups, and it says that each group has at least 1 item. So it is safe to put 3 slots in there. Let's look at the rules. F is in group A. All right, so here's group A. F is in group A. Clearly, we want to put that in the diagram, so we'll do that. F is in group A. How about rule 2? F and G in different groups. F and G don't want to be together. Can't stand each other. F and G, cross it off. We'll cross it off and we'll write the word no. I think it's a good idea to do both. How about 3? G and H, best buds. G and H, always together. And then rule 4, you get these if-then rules. If D is in group C, so here's group C, D is in group C, I'm going to write an arrow to indicate then group C, it has D and it also has E. Hope you can see all that. Then D and E. Now, what's going on here? It takes a while to get used to these if-then rules sometimes. Here's how I like to think about it. So suppose D is little David. And suppose E is Eleanor, his mother. The rule says that if little David is in group C, he has to be with his mother. Eleanor has to be with him. Suppose David is not in group C. Suppose he's in A or B. Does his mother have to be with him? Doesn't say that. Doesn't say that. So those are your rules. We wrote out the rules. Step 2, combine the rules. How do we combine them? Let's see. Rule 1 talks about F. Rule 2 also talks about F. No F and G. So I'm going to write no G on here. If something can't be true, it's often a good idea to write it on the top of the diagram with a minus sign. G, not in group A, so where does it go? B or C, so we will note that. Combine it with rule 3, that means G and H together are in group B or C. Let's see, rule 4, can we combine that? No, rule 4 stands alone. All right, so we've combined the rules. Always a huge step. Step 2, combine the rules. Step 3, We build out the diagram. What can we build out? What conclusions can we draw? Last time we created 2 scenarios. More than half the time you want to do that. In here, we could certainly do that. I could build 2 scenarios based on Rule 2. I could build them based on Rule 4. Scenario 1, if D is in Group C, then E is there. Scenario 2, if D is not in Group C, then we don't know where E goes. Which one would be better? Well, either would be good. Either would be really good. I'm going to go with Rule 4. When you have a rule in which one letter drives the placement of another letter, that can often be a big help to draw 2 different scenarios. So we're going to do that. Scenario 1, D is in Group C, which means his mother is with him. So both D and E, both of them in Group C. Scenario 2, D is not in Group C. So I'll write no D, no D. And let's see. That means, okay, that means he goes in Group A or B. Where does Eleanor go? Could go anywhere. Eleanor, Rule 4 essentially doesn't even apply anymore for Scenario 2. Okay. And then who's left? We've got our GH block. So those are your diagrams. You do as much of this as you can do in 2 or 3 minutes. As I said, first game, 2 minutes. Games 2 and 3 and 4, 2 to 3 minutes. Next step. Anything that could be true, that must be true, that cannot be true. Lots of things could be true. How about must be trues? Look at Scenario 1. The GH block has to go in Group B. So we'll cross that out. So we now know everything there is to know about Scenario 1. Scenario 2, let's see, anything that must be true? We talked about, and I forgot to put F on there. F is in Group A. But besides that, let's see, you know, D, we know where it could go, the GH block where it could go, E where it could go. So we're done with that. As a practical matter, you would have used up your 2 minutes at this point, your 2 to 3 minutes at this point. We're ready to jump to the questions. So that's your intro to logic games. I've tried to be your go-to guy for stress-free LSAT prep. You have been awesome. If you found the video helpful, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to take advantage of the study tips on the community page. I wish you the very best of luck on the LSAT.